Welcome friends to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. On this show, we're looking for the first time at another of the big inventions of the second golden age of sword and sorcery, or, in this case perhaps, dark fantasy. Karl Edward Wagner's immortal sorcerer-warrior, Kane. Joining me for this one is Dave, who called into Derry Toms from a cosmic biscuit tin, because such are the methods by which we oft-times must navigate the tumultuous eddies of time and space. And Kane was Dave's suggestion a wee while back, after we talked about Conan and concluded the history of the rune staff, so we've been talking about it on and off for quite a while. Karl Edward Wagner is an author who seems to have always had a book or two on my shelf, but I just never got round to them, for one reason or another, other than some of his horror tales. Wagner was an interesting bloke too. Challenging, perhaps, for some, but in terms of writing, talented, visceral, and inspired to others, and also a very accomplished editor. Primarily, he was known as a horror author, perhaps. It's been a while since I've dragged the humongous encyclopedia of fantasy from its place on my sagging shelf. So let's see what Johns Clute and Grant may have to say about him. And it's time to put my specs on for this one, because this encyclopedia is not designed for old eyes. But let's see what they say. Wagner, Karl Edward, 1945 to 1994. US writer and editor who wrote several sword and sorcery novels before working almost exclusively in the horror genre. Wagner's first novel, Darkness Weaves with Many Shades, 1970, serves to introduce his anti-hero Kane, an immortal warrior clearly in the tradition of Robert E. Howard's Conan, but in whom can also be seen aspects of Melmoth and other Gothic fantasy archetypes. Kane is further distinguished from his barbarian brethren by his intelligence, introspection, and humour. Kane's adventures continue in Death Angel's Shadow, 1973, Bloodstone, 1975, Dark Crusade, 1976, and several stories which are all collected in Night Winds, collected 1978, and The Book of Kane, collected 1985. Over the course of these, Wagner gradually amplifies his grim protagonist's characteristics while developing many intriguing secondary characters, and continuing to provide some welcome twists. The Kane books helped reinvigorate the sword and sorcery subgenre, providing some interesting variations to a category that had previously been moribund. The series is marked by a propensity towards supernatural adversaries, a tendency that seems to portend Wagner's later move to horror. Wagner also worked more directly with Howard's legacy, writing a sequel to the Bran McMahon stories, Legion from the Shadows in 1976, plus the Conan novel The Road of Kings in 1979, and the screenplay for an unproduced Conan movie, and re-editing several Conan titles for Berkeley. With David Drake, Wagner co-wrote Killer in 1985, a historical fantasy set in Imperial Rome and involving a contest between a beast hunter and a supernatural creature. Wagner's short horror fiction is extremely accomplished, although marked by an increasingly dark, brooding tone in later years. Horrors are hidden beneath the surface in both. Wagner won a World Fantasy Award in 1983 for his vampire reincarnation novella Beyond Any Measure, and won 3 British Fantasy Awards for his short fiction, plus a special British Fantasy Award for editing in 1983. As editor, Wagner was responsible for 15 volumes of Dawes' year's best horror stories, which included some fantasy, and for the 3-volume Echoes of Valor series, which reprinted sword and sorcery tales from the pulp era. He also briefly tried his hand at publishing, acting as a partner in the firm Carcosa House, winner of a 1975 World Fantasy Award, which during the 1970s published single-author collections of pulpier material by Manly Ward Wellman, E. Hoffman Price, and Hugh B. Cave. About 6 years ago, a documentary was made about Wagner called The Last Wolf, Karl Edward Wagner, and it sounds fascinating if the trailer is anything to go by.
What was your first impression of Karl?
Big guy. Don't piss him off. Very intelligent.
He was very original. He had the conventions down pat, but he didn't use them in a conventional way.
He was the meanest guy in the house when it came to drinking, you know. Nobody dared challenge him.
He knew what he was doing. He read the old stuff, he read the new stuff. He knew all this material, and so what he would do, he was to take all that stuff and he would put all that into his stories and make it his own.
He would read sections of stuff he was writing, and everybody would hang on his every word because he was really writing some great stuff.
He was clearly headed for catastrophe. because you cannot drink that much and come out okay.
He was always writing for adults. He writes the most adult horror fiction of anybody I know. And it stands the test of time. Can he still scare you 20, 30 years later? And we know the great ones can. And Karl was one of the great ones.
But, unfortunately, that documentary seems to have disappeared from its listing on Vimeo and is rather hard to get a hold of now, which is a shame. If anyone knows where it may be found, please do drop me a line. Due to his untimely demise at the tender age of 48, Wagner's Kane character was the subject of just 3 novels and somewhere in the region of 20 short stories. No doubt that would have been more had he lived on, and he was working on a 4th novel when he died. Sadly, unless you've got a few quid kicking around, these tales are not that easy to find and are currently out of print. I've picked up most of them over the years in second-hand bookshops, by blind luck, really. Nightshade Press and Centipede Press have published lavish editions, but you may have to sell a kidney to get hold of them. So for now, we're here to talk about just one of them. Tend your fire and brace against the bitter winds as Dave and I take a look at the first story in the collection, Death Angel's Shadow, Reflections for the Winter of My Soul. And we revisit Wagner's Kane and Elric crossover story, The Gothic Touch. Here we are, back in Derry Toms. It's, we're in mid-December now, Dave. Dave's back with us. Welcome back, Dave.
Happy to be here on this gloomy, dark California winter's morning.
Now, are you just taking the piss out of me saying that?
No, it's like, relatively slightly overcast. It's maybe like, it might even be 60 degrees or something, which is pretty chilly for these parts.
Good heavens, yeah. Well, it's already dark here because it's been dark since 4 o'clock in Bradford, unfortunately, since that time of year. But anyway, let's not let that slow us down, eh? I've got no booze today because I'm hungover, because last night we recorded the birthday special Stupid Drunken Quiz.
Oh, and, wow.
Yeah, and that was an interesting one because one of our contestants brought an entire advent calendar of rum miniatures.
Rum miniatures.
Rum miniatures. Of course, that episode will probably go out before this one, so people, if anybody's listened, they'll know about that. But if everybody hasn't listened, here's a trailer for that. We put it on a D20 carousel, like wooden thing, that Phil got me years ago, and we spun it, and whichever miniature of rum was pointing at us, that's the rum we drank. So we combined stupid flavoured stouts, an entire rum advent calendar, and then they went on the wine, and I just started mine-sweeping all the leftover bits of rum and finished off a bottle of Cruzan Blackstrap. So I'm feeling a little bit sensitive and tender today, so yeah, I'm just drinking old Jamaica ginger beer. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Partying for Mr. Moorcock, happy birthday. Wow. That's some vicarious living right there. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Not so bad, though. I've got some green tea this morning. That's my go-to.
Yeah, well, that's very, very good for you. And very good for the digestion. So maybe I should be taking a leaf out of your book today, because I had terrible heartburn this morning as well from all the rum, stout, ginger ale, pizza, wasabi peanuts, which were...
Wasabi peanuts.
They were pretty hardcore as well. So yeah, I've had heartburn all fucking day. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the birthday special because that's out already. That's old news. That's yesterday's fish and chip paper, as we would say in the UK. What's going on with you, Dave? What have you been up to? What's going on with SÖNUS?
Man, well, I tell you what. We just got done shooting 2 music videos for the new album, which I can say is currently planned. We're planning to release it in May. We're just now approving some quotes for physical media. Long and interesting story short. So when you complete an album, right, and you're sending it out to record labels, you got to send out the audio files and stuff like that. I only recently discovered last week, after spending all this time constructing this amazing pitch website, which you've seen, I've sent it to you, and well, as it turns out, our bass player did not upload the actual right final masters to the thing that we sent out to all the record labels.
Oh, no.
So we were going to a show. Me and my drummer were driving back, and he puts it on, and he's like, I don't know, man. I think we should maybe think about mixing this again. Now, mind you, we mixed the album 3 times. Once with the initial guy we recorded. Another time, me and my bass player did it, and then it was like almost there, but then we were both just like, all right, well, what if we just start from the ground up, take all the stuff that he put on off, and then just do it from the ground up. So that's ultimately what we did, and we were really, really happy with that. And then we got it mastered by Matt Mojo Denton at Ragged Birds Music, who did an incredible job, which nobody that we sent it to actually got to hear. So, bit of egg on our face there. We're wondering, like, oh man, nobody's really all that jazzed. I mean, we got like a couple of offers, but we ultimately just decided, like, you know, when you're an indie musician, right, you gotta think about all this. We would have had like a way less break even point for all the production costs if we just financed all that stuff ourselves. So we ultimately just decided that, and the overall value of the deals we were getting, it just didn't really make sense for us to get wrapped into that. So we decided, okay, we're going to go the self-release path. So we've been on that road, and that road is ongoing, and it's finally almost there, as well as we might have another surprise thing in the works to be released a little bit sooner, which we just recorded the other day, but more on that later. But so anyway, so we got 2 new music videos. One of them's coming out, should be in February, and so that'll be the first single release from the new album. To follow up, presumably in May. Yeah, I'll get that nailed down, but you know, it depends on production timelines and stuff like that. So that's what's up with that. Pretty exciting stuff. Finally,
can't wait to hear it. Yeah, so Street Date, mate. Fucking hell, I can't speak, Dave. It's all that bloody rum. Street Date May, potentially.
Yes, looking at a May release there. That's what it's looking like. So, pretty exciting stuff there. Can't wait to finally get this one out. And of course, we're already working on new stuff.
Smashing. Well, of course, we will link to all of your existing releases in the show notes, as ever. But what are we here to talk about today? Well, the last time, of course, we concluded the Rune Staff, didn't we? And we had it was something of a bittersweet moment concluding that, because, of course, we had to deal with and process the horrific death of some of our favourite characters, or one character in particular. But here we are, we're doing something completely different. We had a few conversations over time about what we should do, and we settled on Karl Edward Wagner's Kane. We've talked about this a couple of times over the last couple of years, haven't we? And this is a character that you're super familiar with. And despite having the books on the shelves, I've never read. So when he creates Kane, Wagner's probably not far off the age Moorcock was when he created Elric. So Wagner's 25 when he creates Kane. Whilst Elric was very much a reflection of Mike's psyche at that age, what does Kane say about Wagner, I wonder?
Well, it's interesting because Kane is a 300-pound ginger, which is not too much of a far cry from Wagner. Who's very, very depressed most of the time. But it's interesting because, you know, Wagner was a psychologist. And I think he also had maybe a medical degree as well.
I think he had an MD in psychiatry, didn't he?
I believe, I think that's what it was, And unfortunately, he, drank himself to death at a very way too early age, and so we only have 3 full novels and a couple collections of short stories for this pretty cool character. So it sucks that we never got too much, but Kane is a pretty interesting character. A little bit of a summary: he's essentially a sword and sorcery version of the biblical Cain and Abel story, but God in this universe is insane and angry. Well, I mean, we'll save that for another time. You know, if you want to get into theological discussions, it might be argued that it's not too far off. But anyway, so he curses Cain with immortality. He can't age. He can be killed though. Essentially, he's cursed to wander the earth and never die unless it's by the violence which he essentially introduced into the earth. So he's marked by his piercing blue eyes, that, and he's 300 pounds and has strangler's hands, and so he just kind of goes around, and he's just a real asshole for the most part. He's out and out a villain. It's not like an anti-hero. Like occasionally he'll do stuff that maybe he'll save like a girl he kind of fancies a little bit, but other than that, he's pretty much just in it for himself because he's seen like the civilizations rising and falling that Howard talks about so often, and he's dealt with like these Lovecraftian entities from beyond the mortal plane, and he's it's pretty interesting. So you kind of get these snippets from Kane's long immortal life and adventures like throughout the kind of stories, and most of the time you find him, he's just wandering around really depressed because he's just so tired, so he's just trying to go from one thing to the next, so pretty interesting character though.
Yeah, he's got a sort of Caterpillar Casca thing going on, hasn't he? Which it's like he breaks the mold for some of these characters in a way just as starkly as I think Elric does as well, when a lot of the people around who you've got your John Jakes writing the Brack stories and Lynn Carter doing the Thongor stories, and Kane's a much more interesting character along the lines of Elric. I mean, funnily enough, I have now only read 2 Kane stories. I've read the story that you chose, which we'll get onto in a moment. And of course, we're also going to talk about the Gothic Touch, which is the Elric meets Kane story. Well, Elric and Moonglam meet Kane story from the
That's right.
Tales of the White Wolf volume, published by White Wolf. No, it's Borealis Press, this one. White Wolf Press. Anyway, Borealis, yes. We have the same one, yeah. But actually, the story we're going to talk about first, you chose this. So this is called, it's a fucking great title, I've got to say, Reflections for the Winter of My Soul, which is a tremendous title.
It really is.
Why did you choose this story out of all the stories?
Well, to be honest, Death Angel Shadow, so that's the first story in the collected volume, Death Angel Shadow, which is comprised of 3 short stories, and I chose this because I haven't read this yet. So we'd both be coming into this, well, you definitely, obviously, so I've read all of Night Winds, which is the first collection of Kane short stories. I've read Dark Crusade, which actually this short story, as it turns out, is kind of a follow-up to it. So you don't need to necessarily read all that to enjoy this story. But there's definitely nice little kind of call outs and nuggets to that, and certain of the other short stories in Night Winds too in this story, which I appreciate, because just a nice little nerdy treat for nerds like me.
Well, you can point those out to me as we go along. Because weirdly, the references to Dark Crusade, where he's referring to the Dark Crusade, capital D, capital C, this was published 3 years before Dark Crusade, which is a bit of a mind bender, isn't it? Anyway, right. Let's get down to it. So we have this wonderful, wonderful introduction, which is like, it's just so hammer horror. It's fantastic. Because one of the interesting things about this story, and we'll get to it when we talk about the Gothic Touch, is there are lots and lots of elements and dimensions and contexts to the character of Kane and his world that are not really referred to or talked about in this, but they come up very much in the Gothic Touch. So this reads like a Gothic horror story, more like a Solomon Kane story, really, his namesake.
And actually, there's a very interesting point to that. So Karl Edward Wagner himself, he kind of referred to Kane as less of a, well, he kind of I guess coined the term dark fantasy, or at least that's attributed to him pretty popularly. But he always referred to Kane as more of a Gothic anti-hero, like from like a Gothic kind of story, rather than more of like a sword and sorcery kind of Conan sort of. Even though he's a 300-pound muscle bound, he's not a barbarian. He's actually a sorcerer. So with his immortality, he's plunged into the dark arts. He's familiar. He's interacted with the supernatural monsters. He's befriended some monsters. Of course, he's killed many. Anybody that gets in his way, he's going to kill. But he'll also befriend anything that benefits him in some way. So so that's an interesting thing about this character. So not only is he, an incredibly formidable swordsman, he's also left-handed because, evil. And, but he's also a really powerful and accomplished sorcerer. And so he carries a sword, and it's referenced in the story too, which was made in Karsultial. The naming conventions that Edward Wagner uses are kind of weird, and some of them do not roll off the tongue when you try and say them out loud.
At least you've not got 3 apostrophes in every fucking name, though.
That's true. There's maybe one every now and again, but it's just a lot of weird vowels and syllables kind of strung together. But yeah, so that was forged in Karsultial, and Karsultial was this ancient city where Kane was an incredibly powerful and feared sorcerer. And so that's referenced in a number of stories as well. So he constantly he's coming back to like sites like, decades or even centuries later, and he's like burying something up, or he's digging something up that he buried there, eons before, or finding something. So that's, Elric has his, Ariok, help me, and he summons some powerful sorcery. Kane's Deus Ex Machina is basically, he's like, well, I buried this here centuries before. And it will kill a god.
So he makes a preparedness roll.
Basically, he's got that kind of going on.
Yeah. Well, this is a really, really cool opening. It's really fantastic. It's a bunch of, like, servant people and retainers in the courtyard of a small castle or a large walled manor, and one of the hands has somehow been mangled. This is one of what it says. The victim lay close to the fire, partially lifted from the stone floor by an improvised pillow of rags. His eyes gaped blankly in stark horror, and scarlet bubbles broke occasionally from his slack lips. Relentless fangs had shredded the flesh about his throat and chest, foiled in their attempts to sever the carotids only by the heavy fur cloak and the intervention of a protecting arm. This much could be determined from scrutiny of the dying man, whose silence had been unbroken since that one shriek of mortal terror. Several had pointed out that the servant probably could not speak, even should he come out of shock, for the awful wreckage of his throat would make speech most unlikely. There seemed to be no end to the flow of blood that streamed through the rough bandages to glisten on the stones. The one who usually tended only to injury to livestock had been called to help. The Baron's physician and astrologer could not be found, assuming he would have bothered. Yeah, we'll find out about him. He's a bit of a dick, isn't he? Find out more about him later. The horse surgeon knew it was hopeful, of course, but for appearances he made a few half-hearted attempts to forestall imminent death. The servant uttered one great wet cough that merged with a final spasm. The horse surgeon considered the limp wrist, critically pried up one eyelid, and shrugged. Well, he's dead, he proclaimed needlessly. There was disappointment amongst the watchers, who had hoped to learn from the victim of his assailant's nature. Over them lay a clammy atmosphere of gnawing fear, and several argued louder than necessary, asserting that a wolf, or several wolves, possibly a snowcat, had been the killer. Some had darker suspicions as well, for this frozen land of Marsarovj had its legend. Or its legends, I should say. A sudden hideous movement halted their slow withdrawal. The corpse had lurched upwards from the slippery stones. Supporting itself with arms, it sat half upright and glared at them with wide and sightless eyes. Red, slobbering lips fought to form words. "Death! I see him! Out of the storms he comes for us all!" blubbered the thing which should not speak. "Death comes! A man not man! Death for all!" The corpse toppled hollowly back upon the stones, now silent. "He must not have been quite dead," offered the surgeon finally, but not even he believed that. Nice hammer horror, horrific setup of a corpse that just lives that one moment to warn of impending doom. Oh, but who could the impending doom be? Well, Kane turns up in a minute, so it's probably Kane. So we get to chapter 1, and it's all good stuff. Kane is in a blizzard, being pursued by the priests of Sataki.
Now I can tell you more about that. So this story I mentioned earlier serves as kind of like a sequel to the novel Dark Crusade. So in the novel Dark Crusade, Orted Akkedi is this bandit leader who comes across this, demonic eldritch force which possesses him, and then he grows this cult of beggars and stuff. Like this, very kind of like Charlie Manson-esque. Yeah. And especially considering the time when it was written, that seems to kind of be maybe a little bit inspired by the Manson families, like all the cults kind of going around especially LA in that time. But anyway, so this bandit outlaw, he then grows this force. And of course, as any good evil eldritch god wishes, of course, they want to take over the world and conquer it. But they know that they can't conquer it with such a poorly trained army. So eventually they run across Kane, legendary general. And of course, he's, as we find out in this story as well, he is a legendary figure in this world throughout the centuries. He's essentially a mythological figure. People have kind of heard tales of this traveler and stuff like that. And it turns out they're true. So they, this evil eldritch army cult, basically, they get Kane to be their general, and Kane leads them to many victories, conquering the southern kingdoms. And there's a bunch of political intrigue and all this stuff. And eventually, of course, Kane's purpose and reason for doing that is, well, he wants to, once they conquer the world, then supplant Orted and become the ruler of the world. Which he's tried on a number of occasions in some of these stories. And obviously it failing all of them. So the thing ends with him going through some horrible eldritch dimension and fighting some crazy demonic force, which nearly kills him. But essentially he escapes the cult of Sataki, however it's pronounced, however it's meant to be pronounced, who knows? But that seems about right. So now he was able to kill Orted, but he made the escape, but now he's being pursued through the snow by the last remnants of the zealots of the cult.
It's a curious thing, this, for me, because you have these 3 paragraphs in here, actually more than 3 paragraphs, that basically summarize what you've just said with some detail about, where he enters into the unhallowed interdimensional corridor cast by ancients of the lair of Isilsul.
Exactly.
Isilsul.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of strange because whenever you get the adventures of a character like this, they very rarely give you a 2-page summary of what happened in the story before. But then we find that Dark Crusade was actually published 3 years after this. So did he write this as this is what Kane's been up to, and then a couple of years later think, oh, I'll write that novel now?
So I know that the end of Dark Crusade, which is the chapter, the layer of Isilzul. I just say Isil in my mind just to make it easy. For listeners there, it's spelled YSLSL. No apostrophes, it's just that. So you good luck with that. You pronounce it however you feel. But yeah, I just call it Isil because I don't know, man. There's no right way there. But yeah, so essentially, that I believe was a short story which he then kind of expanded into the novel Dark Crusade.
That makes sense.
So I'm assuming, these were all collected. I am not good about reading like the liner notes in some of these, so the publishing and all that kind of stuff. So I have no idea where these were like originally published, but it's some magazine, I'm assuming. All I know is the books are hard enough to find as it is. They desperately need a reprint.
Yeah, Nightshade Press did a couple of really nice hardcover volumes a few years ago, didn't they? Collecting the novels in one volume and all the short stories in another. But they're going for like $300 or $400 each now.
Not accessible.
Yeah, which is a shame. I'd love to have picked those up. Which edition are you reading from, by the way?
So I am reading from let's see here. This is the Warner Paperback Library, Death Angel Shadow, with this really very interesting cover right here. It's definitely not the Frazetta cover. I'll tell you.
I quite like that, actually. Yeah, I've got the Warner with the Frazetta cover.
Right.
But just out of interest, let's see if our page count is match. Page counts match.
Yeah,
because that might actually come in quite handy. On the contents on mine, it says Reflections for the Winter of My Soul, page 9, Cold Light 87, Mirage 173.
Absolutely, exactly the same. That's going to make this so much easier.
Victory!
Oh yeah. So this is a Warner Paperback Library, 1973, June 1973. Cover illustration by Stan Zagorski. Interior art by John F. Mayer, who I believe was Karl Edward Karl Edward Wagner's friend. Because I'm on the Facebook group, of course, and I see he posts there sometimes.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Mine says the same, actually. Warner Books edition, copyright 1973, but with the Frank Frazetta cover.
That's so weird. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, my taste, I like the Frazetta. Although you actually do get to see Kane wearing some armor in here, which is
I
definitely
actually quite like that. His posture and pose are slightly weird. He's very much crotch forward.
Yeah, he's definitely
yeah,
which kind of makes sense given some of the things in the story.
But you can't really argue with Frazetta, can you? At the end of
hard
the day,
hard to argue with that, even if he's half naked on a cliff fighting a giant gorilla monster. Which, I mean, I haven't read the rest of the stories in here, so maybe that happens. I don't know.
Yeah,
but we'll
just
get
say on
there.
the cover, from the werewolf's lair to the vampire's nest, Kane wields his bloody sword. Doesn't mention anything about huge ape monster. But
nope.
I don't know.
I got that same blurb though.
Maybe there is some kind of vampire action in here. I guess there must. Oh no, it says when he entered. On the back it says, Kane faced death duels in strange swamps, assassins' attacks, the heart-freezing terror of the werewolf, and lived to laugh at danger. But he knew he'd lost his strength and perhaps his soul when he entered the erotic web of the vampire.
Ooh. Yeah, oh. I got that same one there. Oh, man. Well, it's going to get spicy, but not in this episode.
Yeah, I'll save that one for another time.
That's right. Maybe Valentine's Day. Ooh.
Yeah. So we get lots of exposition. Kane bided his time for 4 years, but eventually took his chance and killed the villainous Orted Axedi. But now Kane is in the brutal cold. His horse is failing and freaked out by some perception of danger and the occasional, barely perceptible howls of wolves and the cries of men on the wind. Find out what that is later, won't we? But I love all this, Dave. Love Wagner's prose style, the building menace in the blizzard. Kane is this immortal, but he knows he's freezing to death. He knows his horse has only got limited time left. The world is closing in on him. There's a really, really nice paragraph or two on page 18, and it says, where's my glasses? Better get my fucking glasses on. God damn it. This is getting ridiculous. The horse plodded on, stumbling more frequently now, but refusing to fall. Kane doubted if the beast would be able to rise once it slid down again. Doubted if he would be able to remount it if it could regain its feet. Time and distance had no meaning. He was utterly adrift from the world of time and space. There was only himself and the horse caught up in the rushing blizzard. Whether he moved or only the wind moved, Kane could not tell, nor could he distinguish whether the bits of white moved through the darkness or flecks of blackness through a sea of white. Now his entire body was growing altogether numb. Soon he would be unable to feel the horse on which he rode, and then there would only be Kane, bobbing helplessly, hopelessly, in the maelstrom of ice. This was infinity. Abruptly something clawed at Kane's face. He reeled and lashed out at it drunkenly. His frozen hand encountered a tree branch. Several more whipped at him as his horse painfully slipped its way between several trees. Kane forced himself out of stupor, gathering together the final dregs of his remarkable strength. He often takes time to remind us of how remarkable he is, or how unbelievably tough he is. Is that there? If the horse had blundered into a forest, there was hope yet. It seemed unlikely, for there had been no body of trees in sight before the storm had hit. But how could he know how far the horse had carried him? The wind's roar became muted, and its force was broken by the trees, causing the snow to fall slowly, sifting through the branches. The blackness of night became settled, and in this darkness Kane's eyes could penetrate, although another man would still be relatively blind. It was indeed a forest, or at least the grove of trees extended as far as Kane could discover. From the shelter it provided from the storm blast, it seemed likely that this was, at any rate, a considerable wooded area. Kane urged his faltering mount deeper into the woods. If he could reach a place far enough within to break most of the storm's force, he might build a sort of shelter, possibly get a fire going. He caught the smell of wood smoke on the wind and pulled up. Had his hunters also found the trees, he wondered, or perhaps he had come upon someone else in this wilderness. He followed the smoke hopefully. Should it be the fire of strangers, he would share it one way or another. If he found the Satakis, well, he had been hunted long enough. Kane loosened his sword from its icebound scabbard. At least the cold iron would then find warmth. They would not expect an attack, and maybe with surprise, and if his strength had not been fatally drained by the storm. Visions of carnage passed through his mind as Kane followed the scent of smoke through the sentinel trees. Ooh, I do like all that. I like the fact that, it's just like, for fine, the visions of carnage enter his brain as he thinks about the potential for actually attacking these people and taking them by surprise. Because, as is pointed out a few times in the other story, he is a killer of things, and it's what he was created for. Which,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And he
just found shelter, though. Sorry, go on. He can what?
And he can see in the dark.
He can see in the dark. Yeah, he can. Unlike normal men. Yeah,
that's right.
No normal man, this fella. He just found shelter there in the form of a walled stone manor house to which he finds the courtyard gate ajar In the courtyard, his horse finally gives out and he hammers on the manor house door whilst perceiving something emerging from the snow outside the gate and even entering through the gate as his consciousness fades. And that's our setup. That's our setup. We know that something funky has happened at this place. Kane is trying to survive pursuit through this blizzard, through the forests, through these dark, terrible places, and he finds himself at this, like, oasis. You know, we all like the idea of a manor house and a fire in the middle of a wild of trees and snow, don't we? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he comes round in a chamber in front of a fire surrounded by bustling activities, a couple of servants, a very sleepy maid, and a lady of high estate who's feeding him brandy. And she's a hot babe.
Gotta love
Always a
that.
winner. Oh, always a winner. And Wagner, his description of her, well, it's a great description. Without wanting to appear like a horny teenage reader of sword and sorcery, says, holding the cup to his lips was a tousled girl of elfish beauty. From her magnificent robe of white snowcat and the emerald ring set on her delicate hand, Kane knew her to be a lady of high estate. A mane of pale blonde tresses framed a perfect face from which a pair of wide grey eyes shone. Together with a pointed chin and straight, finely chiselled nose, she presented the picture of a somewhat whimsical pixie, a mouth made for quick smiles now set in concern. Her age might be from late teens to early 20s. Hot fire, rugs, brandy, posh hot lady feeding, you said, brandy. Could be worse, right?
Absolutely. I wish I could wake up like that every day.
Yeah, could be a lot worse. But she's got a big dad, who's a big bear of a man, who walks in and quite good-naturedly quizzes Kane on how he came to be at his door. So let's have a bit of a read, Dave. Would you like to be Kane?
I'll be Kane.
I think that's only correct. Yeah. Kane shrugged off the servant's hands and drew himself to his feet, reeling momentarily in pain and dizziness before he straightened. He met his host's curious gaze and announced formally,
Forgive this ill-timed and unannounced intrusion. I've been wandering through this waste for several days when the storm caught me, and I had about given out before I happened on this castle. My horse fell in your court, and I was unconscious until a moment ago. Had your servants not found me, I would have frozen solid by morning.
In the court, you say? How the hell did you make it past the gate?
It was unlocked when I tried it. Most fortunate that someone neglected it.
Maybe so, but that kind of carelessness can get you murdered in bed. Gregig, can't you remember your duties just because we get a little snow? The porter looked most unhappy. My lord, I distinctly remember locking the gate when the storm hit. I can't understand it. Well, is it locked now? It was locked when I checked it, after finding the stranger. At least even a near snowman has more sense than some fat porters.
The wind must have shut it, for I didn't.
He received a suspicious stare from his host. That isn't possible. Perhaps the fall shook up your memory a bit. Not uncommon, I suppose. Kane remained silent. Well, you're inside. Welcome to my somewhat chilly manor. I am Baron Troylin of Carishall, and the underfed cupbearer there is my daughter, Breenanin. You are welcome to my hospitality until this blizzard lets up and you feel like moving on. We're always glad for some company from the outside world here. Breaks the monotony. Ha! The way that blizzard's carrying on, it looks like we're all going to be snowbound for quite some time.
You are most gracious. I am deeply thankful for your hospitality. My name is Kane. My profession is fighting, but at present I am without a position. I was heading toward Encelios to see if Winston could use my services in his border war with Chektalos, but I strayed off course trying to save some miles from the usual trails. When the storm caught me, I was very well on my way to being lost.
Troylin showed no signs of disbelieving Kane, although Kane doubted if he was as simple as his rough and easy manner seemed to indicate. The Baron was scrutinising his guest carefully, trying to form an idea of what the storm had brought him. Kane was a huge man, not much over 6 feet, but massively built. From an immense barrel of a chest set atop pillar-like legs, Kane's mighty arms hung like great corded tree limbs. His hands were of great size and strength. A strangler's hands, thought Troylin, which is a fucking great description, that. A strangler's hands. And actually, he uses his strangler's hands at the climax of this story, doesn't he? So it's not
and
just...
many other times.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a fun description, it's borne out by events. The man must indeed be powerful, and probably could handle that sword well too. He seemed to be left-handed, as far as the Baron could tell. His hair was red and of moderate length, the beard short as well. His features were somewhat coarse and even a bit foreboding, with a fresh scar on one cheek that seemed to be fading. It was his eyes that bothered Troylin. He had noticed them from the first. It was to be expected, for Kane's eyes were the eyes of death. They were blue eyes, but eyes that glowed with their own light. In those cold blue gems blazed the fires of blood madness, of the lust to kill and destroy. They poured forth infinite hatred of life and promised violent ruin to those who sought to meet them. Troiling caught an image of that powerful body striding over a battlefield, killer's eyes blazing and red sword dealing carnage to all before it. The Baron hastily avoided those eyes and repressed a shudder. Foul! What a manner of a man was this creature! Still, he was a mercenary, a hired killer. Such men were seldom tender poets, and from this bearing Kane obviously was no common ruffian. His manners and speech indicated a man of culture, possibly of breeding. Sons of the best gentry, bastard or lawful, often took to a military career for fortune or for love of adventure. Kane certainly was impressive enough to have been a high-ranking officer, and the rings and fine weapons indicated wealth at some time. His age was strangely difficult to guess. He didn't look physically over 30, but somehow his bearing made him appear much older. Troiling decided he would keep entertained, untangling the mysteries of this strange guest for the next several days. Probably have some real tales to tell too. A change from that minstrel, anyway. Just a few precautions until he was more certain about the man. Then Kane learns that the only reason they realised that it was at the door wasn't because he was knocking, but they heard his horse screaming.
Yeah.
Poor horsey. Yeah, poor horsey. But there wasn't a thing in the courtyard we could see. So the horse was screaming in terror. So mystery upon mystery. Kane has a good kip, but he's wakened by an old geezer, and they get off on the wrong foot from the off. This is Lystric, or Lystric, the astrologer. And Kane, being a suspicious sort, nearly strangles him when he senses the old guy looming over him. And Lystric ain't impressed and tells Kane that he thinks he's a dangerous sort that has no place in his master's castle. But the gaffer has invited him to dinner, so he accepts. And we get a super awkward dinner. Which I think we've all probably at some point in our life been in a position where we've been invited to dinner or had a meal at someone's house where it's really fucking strange and awkward.
With the holidays coming up, with the snow, the winter, this truly is the perfect holiday story.
Yeah,
right
this
here,
is like a really bad Thanksgiving, isn't it?
Encapsulated with the awkward Christmas dinner there.
Yeah, because at dinner he meets the Lord of the Manor's other child, his son Henderin, a big blonde lad who's also a sullen, bratty turd, with two retainers who seem to be there to keep an eye on him. And he kicks off because he's served cooked meat and screams and demands to be served raw flesh. Oh.
He's literally a lunatic from like the actual origin, somebody who thinks that they're a werewolf. Or maybe he doesn't just think it.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
He is our gigantic red herring, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He's our gigantic red herring. But Ken's cool. He doesn't have to fix a grin on and laugh mildly hysterically at the man of the house's bad jokes because he wants to be out of there like a normal bloke would. He's no normal guy. He could just sit and wait it out. And after Henderin finally settles down, after another outburst and some words from the old astrologer, the dinner settles into a more agreeable groove. And Kane sups and chats with Baron Troiling, who seems like an agreeable geezer who just decided to bring his family out of town for a cosy rural winter. But, yeah, a servant with Jabberjaw later on tells him the real story. He became conscious of an unpleasant sensation of scrutiny after a while and looked for the source. In the shadows slouched a figure with a lute, a lean man whose eyes gleamed a startling red in the firelight. Following Kane's gaze, Troiling caught sight of its object and called out, "Ah, Evangelis, there you are. Wondered where you were lurking tonight. Come over here and give us a tune. We've been jabbering too hard to do any serious drinking." Turning to Kane, he said, "This is Evangelis, the most accomplished minstrel you'll ever have the pleasure of hearing. I had the fortune of attaching him to my patronage this summer, and he's a delight to have around on these winter nights." He went on to describe the many virtues of the minstrel. The object of the Baron's praise strode silently from the shadows and took a vantage point by the fire. Moving his long fingers over the lute strings with fluid grace, he sang in crystalline tones of a blind princess and her demon lover. One of the Opirus cycle, Kane recognised. He recalled the bizarre fate of that blighted poet. The minstrel himself, an unusual figure. He was an albino, with the characteristic pale skin, white hair and pink eyes. Kane could hazard no guess as to his nationality, having found the singer's accent unlike any he could place. In height, Evangelis was several inches taller than Kane, and although he was thinly built, there was no hint of softness or weakness to him. His features were finely moulded, but sharp rather than effeminate. His thin hair he wore cut short, his face clean-shaven, and as he sang, his pink eyes stared into infinity, perhaps seeing the strange events of which he told. Kane noticed that Henderin watched the minstrel with rapt attention, seemingly magically charmed by the tale. Oh, so he's got a strange albino minstrel who speaks with an accent that Kane can't quite get his head round.
And recalls the Opiro cycle, which is, listeners, if you want to know more about that, read the tale of the Dark Muse and Night Winds, which is a really cool tale featuring Opiros and Kane. And you can see what the actual bizarre fate of that blighted poet comes to be. It's a very weird tale. Very much like Lovecraftian, Clark Ashton Smith, that kind of thing. A little bit of Robert Chambers, King in Yellow kind of vibes, and some of the stuff that he mentions in that tale. So that's a cool one. Go check that one out.
I find it very interesting. This is written in 72 or 3, certainly published in 73. Wagner's already a member of the Swordsman and Wizards Guild of America, or whatever they're called, the Lynn Carter gang, who wrote stories for the Flashing Swords volumes. I think it was called, Swordsman and Wizards Guild of America? Along with Moorcock, anyway. Moorcock was part of that. And Elric's been around for over 10 years at this point. You know, obviously, albino characters aren't just a specific property of Mike, but I do wonder if it's just a wee nod, you know, to the Elric character of Moorcock. I could imagine this could be a projection of one of Elric's dream selves during his 1,000-year dream. You know, I kind of like it. I buy into that a little bit. Although, you know, more to come on Evangelist, of course. And I keep calling him Evangelist because I keep thinking Vangelis for some reason. And also, it's another one that's hard to pronounce. But the evening is interrupted by the return of one of Troilin's men, Tally, and Tally has news of a grim discovery. A party of 8 men, frozen stiff, but not before they and their horses had apparently been torn to pieces by wolves. And Talon has brought back a medallion that one of them wore, and it was the priests of Sataki. So one less problem for Kane, perhaps. But to be honest, Kane's got 99 problems, and the priests of Sataki are no longer one, are they?
Gotta love that.
Yeah. He learns from a Jabberjawed servant as he prepares to head out on a hunt with the Baron and his men. The servant, by the way, is a little bit unimpressed that, despite the fact that they found a party of 8 men and their horses torn to pieces by wolves, that the Baron is going to head out on a hunt. Servant probably has a point. Probably going to be proved right. Yeah. He's very loose-lipped, and he tells Kane that the Baron had to leave the city because Henderin was facing being burned to death for tearing a guardsman's throat out with his teeth and eating it as he died. So yeah, Henderin got problems as the lad. And as the old astrologer wasn't particularly well regarded by the house staff in his role helping Henderin behave, he's not very popular either. In fact, only a few days ago, a servant had his throat torn out, he tells Kane, and the servant is dubious about the wisdom of the hunt on the back of all this. But the hunt seems to go well. Kane's exhilarated by it. They hunt with dogs. They split up when 2 bull stags are sighted and chased. But it all ends, unfortunately, for the poor bull stag. It does go one of the dogs to death. We won't read the hunt because one of our listeners did say that when we did the ice schooner, the readings about the hunting of the whales were too distressing. So we're not going to read that. But we will maybe read a little bit because 2 of the hunters go to restrain the dogs after this point, after the stag has been brought down. And I think we can read the bit where the hunters get viciously mauled by wolves.
That's fine to maul people. You know.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah, so 2 of the hunters hurriedly dismounted and ran to pull off the crazed hounds, at which point the wolves attacked. They fell on the hunters swiftly, silently as a striking serpent. A pack of perhaps 15 huge grey killers suddenly were on them, having come up unseen from the trees behind the hunters. 1 second the thrill and excitement of the kill, then a shriek of terrified agony, a ravine swarming with snarling shapes. They were the great grey wolves of the northern wastes, nearly 6 feet long and 150 pounds of slashing, yellow-eyed death. In a rage of bloodlust, they attacked the startled humans, and hunters now switched roles with prey. The first to scream died almost instantly. A giant wolf had leapt upon him, hurtling him from his saddle and onto the snow. Choking the gaping fangs with an elbow, the hunter drew his knife and gutted the beast with a desperate stroke. Yet before the beast's hold had broken in death, a second grey killer slashed in and ripped open the man's throat. The two hunters on the ground never stood a chance. One lived long enough to wrest free a spear from the elk's carcass. He spitted the first wolf to meet him, but as he tried to pull the weapon loose, two more bore him to the frozen ground and tore him apart. The other was down before he could react, but he managed to get to his hunting knife, and beneath the gory huddle of grey shapes his arm plunged in and out, long after it seemed possible for life to remain. His efforts inflicted deep gashes in several of his slayers. The hounds closed with the wolves with the unquenchable hatred of the tamed canine for his wild brother. At least one wolf rolled away from the snarling melee with his eyes glazed in death, and several others were flung back with crushed legs and gushing wounds. But numbers and wild ferocity overwhelmed the valiant struggle of the great hounds, and their fearless defiance ended in crimson ruin. Oh, Crimson Ruin. That's good. I like that.
It's a good band name right there.
Yeah. But Kane's all right because he has fantastic reflexes and blinding speed. So, Kane fights off all the wolves, is the last man standing. He finds a bolted horse, calms it down, then sets off to find the rest of the party. But he hears feminine screams. It turns out that Breenanin, the hot babe daughter, denied by her father when she wanted to join the hunt, followed anyway and got waylaid by wolves and had to hide up a tree. Fortunately, Kane to the rescue. They not only reunite with Troilin and co, who got their elk, and they went unmolested. It's all a bit grim because they have a hunt banquet, but with 5 of the Baron's men and a load of his dogs dead by wolf, Listrick is giving everyone side-eye as usual. And after having to deal with Henderin following a few hours at large trying to escape the castle grounds. So, Henderin was loose when all this went down. I must say at this point, this is a whodunit, isn't it? Right.
It is.
This story. This is The Beast Must Die fantasy version. Have you ever seen The Beast Must Die?
I haven't.
It's an absolutely terrific amicus movie from the early 70s in Britain. It's almost got a blaxploitation edge.
Okay.
Because of the lead star, but Peter Cushing's in it, and it's this guy, this awesome suave black guy who wears all black leather, invites this group of strangers to his estate. He's a big game hunter, and he knows that one of them is a werewolf, and that's why he's invited them all along. It's terrific for a number of reasons. One is it's just got that sort of early 70s cool vibe that a lot of these films have. It's amusing because the dog that they dress up as a werewolf obviously is a really, really good boy, and they've just put like a big ruff around his neck.
No kidding.
And the third best thing about it is about 10 minutes before the end, everything grinds to a halt and a caption comes up on the screen and says, "This is the werewolf break," and then invites you to decide who the werewolf is. It's absolutely fantastic. Look up a trailer of The Beast Must Die.
All right, but please tell me, is there like a groovy bass and like wah electric guitar like in the soundtrack in any way? Because I will.
There is very of the moment soundtrack.
Oh God, I got it. Okay, I got to check that out.
You need to seek it out.
The rest of my Sunday.
Yeah, you need to seek it out. It is absolutely terrific. I tell you what, right? We've never done this before.
When the moon is full, the beast must die.
Oh man.
One of you is a werewolf.
Oh hell yeah!
You must track down the werewolf. One of these 8 people is a werewolf. Can you guess which one?
Which one? Which one? Which one? Which one?
Which one?
Which one? Which one? Which one?
One of these 8 people will turn into a werewolf. Can you guess who it is when we stop the film for the werewolf break? See
the werewolf break?
But don't tell.
That poster.
The beast must die.
That wolf man, honestly, legitimately creepy.
Yeah.
That looks awesome.
So, listeners, what I will do, so you know what the fuck we're talking about, is I'll at the very least put the audio from that trailer. I'll drop the audio in here as well, so you can actually hear what we're talking about. But yes, if you've never seen The Beast Must Die, you must watch The Beast Must Die, because it's one of my favourite werewolf films. It's not a great film, I should point out, but it is a fun film. It's a fun film. And the guy, Calvin, the star, the black guy, Calvin can't remember his surname, went on to play, many years later, King Willie of the Voodoo Posse in Predator 2.
No shit, I just watched that the other day. Honestly,
Same guy.
underrated movie. That movie is
Same guy.
badass.
I fucking love Predator 2. Yeah.
Predator 2 is awesome.
I've loved it from the day I saw it at cinema. But yeah, you know what I believe. Shit happens. So his Voodoo Posse gang. The guy who throws the bones with the big dreadlocks, King Willie. Yeah, same guy, same actor.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Factoid. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Predator 2 fucking love story. Oh, hell yeah. I fucking love Predator 2. It's amazing. But yes, the banquet is a grim affair. 5 of the Baron's men dead, a lot of his dogs dead, Listrix unhappy. There's much whispered talk of the weird behaviour of the wolf packs, openly attacking large groups of armed men. It's all very disturbing. But it turns out that servant did have a point. It wasn't a wise decision to go out hunting in these conditions, certainly with what was going on. But, fed up of the maudlin atmosphere, Baron Troilin bids Evangelis raise the mood with a song. So he does, with a song that freaks Kane out a little bit. Because what's the language that he sings this song in? Ancient something or other.
It's gotta be... Was it Carsultio? Let's see.
The minstrel's song was in archaic Ashatiri.
Okay.
A tongue Kane doubted if another man within days of travel could understand. The song was the work of the long-dead and ill-famed poet Clem Ginnek of ancient Ashatiri, whose efforts had left those of his age uncertain whether he was a poet turned sorcerer or the reverse. Within an endless mirror of my spirit's infinite soul, I reach back into timeless ages beginning or unbegun, and see a crystal pattern, fluctuating panorama, forgotten by the gods but unveiled to inward sight. "Let's have something in Karasali!" roared a drunken soldier. An insane elder god in his madness sought to build a race of mortal creatures in the image of divine. In foolish egomania, fatal folly, the artist had conspired, with his mortal image, godlike perfection to contain. Blindly had forgotten that an image so conceived must embody the very madness of its deluded parent. Great cataclysmic toil, cyclopean effort did he make, to the taunting laughter of his fellows, amused to see a fool. He cluttered all the earth with his blighted handiwork, and rested in smug content with his idiot labour. Several louts began to beat on the table in protest to the eerie, unintelligible song. In time this fool's creation multiplied all through the land, and disgusted those before them with their drivel. Content to live a worm-like existence for the pleasure of their god, who in his mindless conceit only giggled with his dolls, yet in one there rose rebellion with his crawling in cosmic dung. No maggot but a serpent was this son of divinity's folly, and in his hellish fury at the crooning lies of that creator, he chose to be his own master, and defied this nameless god, and with his hands he slew his brother, choicest plaything. Now despair racked the broken mind of this insane elder god, for he saw the flaws within his cherished children, and recognised himself as the author of that image. This rebel he cast in rage to bleak eternal wandering, and gave him the eyes of a killer. So all know, the mark of Kane. Oh, blimey. Well, the drunken fella goes, "Damn your pale hide, minstrel. I said give us something we all know." So he chucks his cup of ale in the minstrel's face, and fucking names. In Evangelis's face, there flashed a look of white-hot anger. He laid the lute aside and wiped his burning eyes. Then, with a movement too swift to follow, his hand lashed out and struck the soldier's laughing face. As if kicked by a horse, the drunkard shot backwards onto the stone floor. He did not get up. Shocked silence caught the audience. They had considered the lean albino a weakling. So, Kane, the Baron thinks this is hilarious. Kane, less so. Kane, bit discomforted by this whole scenario.
Well, of course, the guy just put him on blast. That's his whole origin story there.
Yeah, he did. He really did. Then we get a massacre. Massacre in the castle. It's a massacre, Dave. In a really nice narrative POV following the leader of the wolves, a white-furred, taloned werewolf. A white wolf.
Ooh.
That can open doors and everything. 30 wolves enter the castle grounds, infiltrate the soldiers' lodge, fall upon them as they sleep. God, I'm going to have a hell of a time editing this. Fall upon them as they sleep. A brutal, gory massacre, then they withdraw before the entirety of the castle is roused. But a dying soldier tells Kane of the fearsome leader, a huge, wild, white wolf in human form, but tracking reveals a shock to the inhabitants, perhaps, but not so much to us readers. The tracks of the werewolf lead to the woods, then they double back to the castle wall and disappear. Someone in the castle is a werewolf.
Dun dun dun!
Bah, bah, bah. Now it's time for the werewolf break. It's not yet time for the werewolf break, to be fair. Maybe we will have one, though. It's all getting fractious now between Baron Troilan and his men, and they're on the verge of rebelling, because in the Baron's words, not counting the women, this made me suspicious, this line, not counting the women, that leaves our strength at 30, and one of us is a werewolf. Gotta say, Dave, at this point, I was thinking Hot Babe might be the werewolf.
Well, there are
not saying she wasn't
passages that highlight her blood red lips and the teeth below them, and why was she in the tree when the wolves attacked? That's an interesting thing, huh?
That's right. He's littering lots and lots of clues, lots and lots of red herrings. It works really well as a whodunit. This I'm going to get Phil to read it, actually, because Phil loves a detective story and she loves a whodunit. And we watched the latest Knives Out movie last night.
How was that? I haven't seen it yet.
It's too long.
Okay.
It was fine. I enjoyed it, but
the last one too.
I fell asleep for the last 20 minutes and Phil had to fill me in when I woke up, when we went to bed. Just, I can handle long films, but I just wasn't that way out for it that night. It is fun. It's very funny in places, knowingly funny. Josh Brolin is really good in it as this absolute fucking knobhead of a priest who gets murdered. That's the central mystery. But yeah, it's good. I quite like those films anyway. So yeah, fun. But we were, nodding along and exchanging words and decided, who do you think it is? Phil had it all figured out in 20 minutes. Within 20 minutes of the film starting, Phil knew who the villain was, or the villains, I should say. Phil had it all down. Yeah. Smug cow. I'll probably edit that out.
Probably a good idea to edit that one out.
She doesn't listen to it. She doesn't listen to this podcast. She'll be on it, but she won't listen to it. She's like one of those actors who, when they're interviewed about a TV series, they're and say, "Well, I've never watched it. I do these jobs, but I never watch the shows that I'm in." Yeah.
I can't stand to see myself. I'm
too cool for school. Yeah.
I do admit I listen to my own albums. It's true. I listen to the episodes that I'm on. What does that say about me? I don't know. But what can I say? I like doing the stuff that I do.
Yeah. It was really funny doing the quiz last night because I had 3 contestants, one of whom is a patron, the other 2 are regularly on the podcast as co-hosts, and there were questions about the podcast, even about the ones that they'd been on, and they didn't know the answers. Phil particularly. I even, and I'm gonna make a confession here. I even loaded some questions into the quiz that I thought I was going easy on Phil with. She didn't get them.
Damn.
She didn't get them. Because to her, it's a conversation we had 2.5 years ago. Yeah. She's never actually listened to any of these episodes. Yeah. But anyway, it's not long before the finger of accusation heads, quite reasonably, towards the Baron's son, Henderin. I mean, if we're in that castle, Dave, we're pointing at Henderin.
Seems pretty damn obvious from everybody there.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's literally raving and craving raw meat, and he's already killed at least 2 people.
Yep. But the Baron threatens them all that any harm to a noble will result in crucifixion, and his hot pixie babe daughter pleads for their understanding about Henderin's illness. So, yeah, it's all the beast must die. Henderin, though, is too obvious, isn't he? It's too obvious.
Absolutely.
Kane, at this point, wisely not taking sides, just observing the back and forth, until he does decide to intervene in rather an amusing manner. And this is Tyler's dialogue, and then there's a big piece of dialogue from Kane as he blasts the old astrologer.
Oh, yeah.
Tally persisted, well, if Henderin isn't the werewolf, there's sure a lot of evidence against him. First, we knew he killed the guard like he was a wild animal. We all know he's crazy. All the time asking for raw meat and howling nights and going berserk. Second, when the hunting party was attacked yesterday, Henderin was running around loose. Caught him coming back from the forest. Mighty strange, wolves attacking armed men on horseback, while an unarmed man on foot runs around unharmed, like he didn't need to fear them, like he was just there telling to kill us. Okay, where is Henderin when these other attacks happen? Poor Bet gets his in the storm. Bunch of travellers get theirs too. And the thing last night in the soldiers' quarters. And Henderin, oh, he's safely locked up, so we're promised. Only thing is, we've just got Listric's word for that, and I, for one, don't care to believe everything that scheming old fossil has to say. Listric snarled a stream of curses, and the affair came close to blows. Kane saw his chance.
That's the most interesting point you've made. Let's talk about Listric for a moment. I understand he was just a fifth-rate hack of a wizard with a smattering of occult knowledge, unable to make a go of it until suddenly he gets this job. Sort of suspicious, don't you think? A perfectly normal, likable guy begins to act like a wolf, and this cunning old fakir announces he knows how to cure him. Nice soft position for him, but only as long as Hendren stays mad. And I understand about all Listric's idea of treatment consists of is letting Hendren run around until he snaps out of it. Interesting way to treat demonic possession. Put it all together and it sort of sounds like Listric has made a plush position for himself. There are several strange drugs and countless spells that can make a normal man begin to act like a wolf.
Listric was shrieking protestations and curses by this point, too enraged to make a rebuttal. The others were listening intently.
So Listric thinks he's all set. Once in a while, Hendren gets away from him and stirs up some mischief, so the old vulture finds it necessary to claim he was under lock and key all the time. Or take it a step further. Maybe he's mad himself and he's using Hendren as a tool to destroy us. I understand he and the Baron have no cause to love one another. Magicians have curious ways of settling grudges. And, for that matter, Listric just might be a werewolf himself. Not the first time a sorcerer lost his humanity by meddling in the black arts. With Hendren as camouflage, it would be a perfect setup to wipe us all out while he chased the wrong fox.
So what do you suggest we do? Asked Tally, no longer as sure of himself.
Remain calm. My point is, we don't know that Hendren is really a werewolf, and Listric has some mighty questionable connections himself with all this. So we place a guard on them both. Hendren is locked up. We just need to make sure he stays that way. At the same time, put several men to watch Listric. That way, they're both harmless and no one gets hurt. If they're innocent, we'll let them go. And since they're under surveillance, we're safe from them. No rebellion, no useless fighting. We might even see a sudden improvement in Hendren's condition.
He paused. About him, listeners were showing signs of assent. Here was a reasonable solution that both factions could accept. Sounds good, concluded Tally, who seemed to act as spokesman. We'll do it then. Forgive us, my lord, for our threats. Of course, none of us mean any harm to you or to Hendren, if he's innocent. It's just this whole business has gotten a lot of us unhinged. We're all in a bad fix here, and not knowing whether the man next to you is a friend or a monster, well, we just lost our heads. So the Baron's quite satisfied with this, much to the old fellow's disgust, who then goes on a massive page-long rant blaming the arrival of Kane for the terrible events and generally casting aspersions on his character. But the plan is set. But given the old man's diatribe against Kane, yeah, he's got much food for thought as the Baron. But it turns out the werewolf is a smarty pants. So after chilling out in the hall by the fire with a load of booze, which sounds really nice, and listening to Evan Gollis pluck his lute, Breenanin, the hot babe, sits with him, being all hot, and she stirs old feelings in Kane that he dimly remembers. And I love that. It's like, this is mentioned a couple of times, that he not only dimly remembers, he forgot that those kind of feelings could exist. So yeah. all she's doing, she's rousing something in him, which is quite simply, this girl is really attractive, and I like talking to her, and I haven't experienced this in such a long time, I've almost forgotten it as a phenomenon. Because it's so old and jaded.
And that's another point that he kind of mentions, which is definitely an interesting thing for his character, is that he's experiencing all this without her treating him that way as a result of his own manipulations.
Yeah, it's honest. Yeah.
It's just naturally coming from her.
Yeah. And I think one of the most interesting things for his character is occurs here as well, because she falls asleep, so he takes her up to bed, tucks her in, and just leaves her there to sleep. See how that works, Conrad Arflane, you fucking goon? If this had been an Eternal Champion character or fucking Ice Schooner character that had took her up to bed and got jiggy with her, you know?
Yeah.
Kane is a very cool character. I think.
Well, don't get too far ahead of yourself on that one because there is another story. Oh God, which one is it? It's I think it's "Sing a Last Song of Valdez" in Night Winds anyway, where it's actually revealed that he has a daughter through raping a
Jesus
tavern
Christ!
So bad Kane, bad guy.
We can't have anything nice, can we?
No, you can't.
We can't have anything nice.
Not in this world. But at least, during this century, whatever this story takes place in, he did not do that to this person.
How disappointing!
Kane is a bad guy. Don't forget that.
Okay. So this is just a moment of mildness then.
Yes.
Well, fucking hell. Oh well. Anyway, it all goes a bit Pete Tong from here anyway, Dave, doesn't it? Because he finds blood in a hallway. 4 guards dead in a side room. The guards by Listric's tower all slain by unknown means. And kicking the door into the old astrologer's quarters, he finds him almost decapitated. His head has been almost pulled clean off. So he heads up to the son Hendering's room, but the werewolf catches him on the stairs and he engages in a brief combat with the werewolf, this huge white wolf that towers over him. And his sword doesn't work. It just bounces off him like the werewolf is made of iron. And the werewolf knocks him out. And he wakes up by Listric's corpse in the puddle of Listric's blood, with Listric's blood in his mouth, just as a crossbow-armed Evangelist walks in and sees him kneeling by the dead man as he's getting to his feet. Stitch up like a kipper, right? Stitch up like an absolute kipper. So, it's all gone a little bit strange for him. I mean, I'm thinking at this point, how many fucking people are left in this castle, right? Because the body count is really, really racking up.
Oh, yeah.
But, Chapter 9, let's have a go. The surprising thing was that they had not killed him immediately. Kane's fast tongue was some help in postponing matters, but he suspected Breenan had been more effective. The Baron had not completely forgotten that Kane had rescued his daughter from almost certain death. Evangelist had spelled it out point by point. The first death had occurred right before Kane had ridden out the storm. A search after the storm had disclosed the mutilated remains of another band of travellers abroad in the blizzard with Kane. During the hunt, it had been Kane's party that the wolves had attacked, and only Kane had been witness, himself miraculously unscathed. And when the werewolf and its pack murdered the soldiers in their lodge, Kane had not come up on the scene until late. Finally, this last attack had come while Kane had prowled the hallways alone. And when Evangelist had discovered him, he was crouched beside the torn body of the old astrologer, a man who claimed to have damning knowledge of the mysterious stranger. But they had not killed him yet. Instead, they had taken Kane and thrown him in a cell in the castle's cellars. Now, a thick wooden door fastened by a stout bar stood between Kane and 3 menacing guards. Through a narrow grilled aperture in the door, Baron Troylin regarded his prisoner.
You know you're making a mistake in this.
I suppose you killed Listric because you knew he'd unmask you, and to think you even had me suspecting that poor man.
Damn your thick skull, that old fool couldn't count his fingers and get a correct answer. I told you I found him like that before the werewolf knocked me senseless by the stairs.
Strikes me as a bit odd this werewolf didn't kill you, even went to the trouble to drag you across the room. Didn't know such a thing had that much restraint. Kane pounded his fist on the wall in frustration.
It may be a monster, but the creature's as cunning as any man. Looks like it hoped to frame me and throw the rest of you off the scent.
Speaking of framing, that's a nice job you did on my son. Guess you figured to make it look like he'd broken loose and slain the lot. Only we caught you before you could finish preparations. Had to stop for a meal, I guess. Too bad you didn't arrange for Hendering to escape first. You might have had us all believing it was him.
You're just so damned anxious to clear that son of yours, you'll grasp at anything else that presents itself. Why wasn't I a werewolf when Evangelist found me? Why didn't I kill him and escape? How did I get this crack on the skull? Why did I rescue your daughter from the wolves?
Oh, I'll agree there's a few things that don't seem to check out. That's the only reason you're still alive. Which you won't be if you try to break out of here. Most of them would be just as happy to see you burning right now, only I figure I owe you at least a chance. So we'll just watch you a few days. Hendering too, just to be safe. If the creature strikes again, we'll be sorry for doubting you.
More than likely you'll be dead, and me with you. And what if nothing more happens?
The Baron shook his head grimly. Guess then we'll just have to build a fire for you to sit in. Kane cursed in frustration as the Baron departed. The yokels would do just that, and Troylin would consider Hendring cleared of guilt. Meanwhile, if the werewolf still were at large, which seemed an absolute certainty, the idiots would drop their guard and let him roam at will. He sat down in disgust, enjoying the agony of his battered skull. Breenanin visits him, and the guard dog doesn't like Breenanin, does it? Guard dog's growling and howling at Breenanin. Is that a clue, or is it another red herring? But there's a nice moment in here where Breenanin commended him for being so gentle, doubtless referring to him putting her to bed and not trying to get jiggy with her. And Kane reflects on how long it's been since he was described as gentle. So, Kane, you're such a disappointment to me. Now I know these things that Dave's just told me. But Kane muses in discussion with her on the fact that striking the werewolf with his sword was like striking stone. And that legend has it that silver is effective, or simple physical force. And Breenanin shares that she has a small decorative silver dagger that she will keep close, and she departs again. But Kane is getting a bit sus now. So I'm just going to read this last paragraph. Kane listened to the watchdog's snarl, and an uneasy thought recurred to him. Where had Breenanin been during those murderous attacks? Something about her presence in that tree and the wolf's half-hearted attempts to reach her had been nagging the back of his mind for some time. He shook the thoughts away. Again, only guesses and circumstances. Any man here could be shown guilty by that course. Troylin, Evangelis, Tally, any of the Baron's men. And she was but a girl. But wasn't the she-wolf fully as dangerous as the male? Littering in all sorts of clues. But chapter 10. This is one of those rare occasions on this podcast where I think I'm slightly reluctant to spoil this story. Because it's a whodunnit after all. And it's a really good whodunnit. And there's more than a mischievous streak from Wagner in the denouement, particularly the identity and final moments of the werewolf, and the description of the werewolf in its final moments, and what it turns into once it's slain. Which, it's, and we've even referred to that as we've gone, those precise words as we've gone, which really foreshadowed the solution to this. But I'm thinking that maybe we don't give it away. We will declare a werewolf break, and we will let the readers decide. Yeah, the readers we'll declare a werewolf break, and we will let the listeners decide. I'll see if they're right by reading this bloody story, if they can get hold of this book for a reasonable price, that is. Or write it on a postcard, and we'll send you the postcard back with the answer, or something stupid like that.
This is the werewolf break. Have you guessed who the werewolf is? Made up your mind? Let's see if you're right.
What we can spoil, though, everybody dies.
Everybody dies. And Kane has a knockdown, drag-out, WWE SmackDown fest with the werewolf because, as we know, the sword doesn't work. Yeah. And, let's just say the silver dagger gets plunged into one of the dead people. Yeah. Who is upstairs, and Kane, of course, being in the cellar. So Kane, he breaks his way out of his cell by just drop kicking the shit out of it with his massive 300-pound brick shithouse frame. And then he and the werewolf go full on. He's now the werewolf sees in Kane's eyes that killer madness, and you get another description of Kane just imagining the carnage that he's going to inflict on the werewolf. Yeah. And he knows that the swords are useless, so he's running up the stairs because he knows the silver dagger should be there, but the werewolf's gaining on him. So he turns around and he just kicks the werewolf right in the fucking chest, just punts him down the stairs, and then just tackles after him. Boom, boom, boom. They fight. They're fighting. The werewolf gets slashed on the shoulder by that silver dagger from somebody else prior to that, so his shoulder is a little weak. They end up in this embrace where the werewolf is trying to crush Kane's spine and ribs to death, and Kane, with his strangler's hands, has the werewolf by the throat, and So
Kane's musculature is so dense that the werewolf cannot actually crush him in the way that it crushed mortal men earlier on. And he uses his strangler's hands. He goes mano a lupine, with 6'5" white werewolf, and emerges victorious. It's pretty impressive. It's like a 3-page catch-as-catch-can brutal wrestling match where he emerges victorious. And if you have any idea if you don't have any idea before this of how remarkable Kane is as a man and a warrior and a bag of muscle and determination, then you absolutely find out at the end of this. Because up until this point, other than fighting the wolves, he's actually been quite cultured and
well-mannered and well-spoken and erudite and all this.
Yeah, Troilin and his daughter, they're like, oh yeah, this guy's a man of breeding, this guy's he's well-spoken, he's knowledgeable, he's intelligent, he seems like quite a decent fella. But no, he's a fucking rippling ball of muscle that will tear your throat out and can basically wrestle a werewolf to death.
Yeah. And conjure necromantic spells and communicate with Kane can kind of do it all. He's a little bit of a was it like a Mary Sue? What is the trope that like somebody who can just kind of do it all a little bit?
Yeah.
But that being said, he still gets his ass kicked enough to the stories are still definitely very interesting, because even though he doesn't age and he won't die from that, he can still be killed by violence. He can still be killed in battle, although he does regenerate. Not exactly like Wolverine, but like pretty darn quick from stuff, which you find out in the novel that that precedes this story directly.
Yeah. Interestingly though, had the werewolf not been a smartass and decided to frame him, the werewolf had him down, didn't it? The werewolf had him cold.
Absolutely.
And could have finished him off, but the werewolf just had to be a smartass.
Yep. The werewolf wanted to toy with Kane. And that's what happens. Every villain, they just want to toy and play, and then they get their asses kicked. So it's another perfect example of just kill the guy.
yeah. But you know what? What a fucking great story! My first Kane story. Notwithstanding the fact you've told me that he's an absolute knobhead in other tales, I actually liked him as a protagonist. I thought the setup was great. The gothic horror of it all was great. The whodunnit element of it was fantastic and really, really well established. Yeah, brilliant. And the little nods to other things were very, very nice as well. But yeah, absolutely fantastic story. Great first Kane story to read. So what an ace choice. Thank you very much.
There you go. I've heard that this is one of the better ones, and I definitely enjoyed it. Really good atmosphere. Karl Edward Wagner, I think, was more of a horror writer than anything.
Yeah.
I think that's what
Styx is fantastic.
I still have yet to read that, but So that being said, when he's in his element, putting Kane through the dark and the spooky supernatural stuff, it really works. Some of the other novels, when he's got big massive armies and it's a lot of and then the infantry charged, and then there's a lot of that goes on, especially in Dark Crusade. And that stuff, he does a good job at that. Pretty commendable. Not quite as exhilarating as maybe Howard gets to, but I put him pretty much on the same level of Moorcock in terms of like combat descriptions. Really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good stuff.
Yeah, I think out of all of them, and there are a lot of great authors out there.
Oh, yeah.
I was surprised how much I enjoyed the John Jakes Brack book. I thought that was pretty entertaining. But there's lots of these authors out there writing these things, and you've got your Fritz Liebers and your Poul Andersons and all that business. But I think from what I've just read just now, Wagner is right easily up there. I think Howard's still top of the pile, but Kane is up there alongside Moorcock, I think, on the back of just this short reading. And I'm definitely going to read more. And yes, maybe we should get together in early February for a Valentine's episode on erotic vampires versus Kane.
There you go. I'm in for it.
Yeah, let's do it. Now, we are going to very briefly touch upon the Gothic Touch as well, which was in this Tales of the White Wolf collection. We won't go through it in detail, but we'll just pass comment on it, because I did read it earlier on. I first read this a long, long time ago when this first came out, and I didn't know who Kane was as a character. So reading it now I kind of have an idea of Kane as a character. I've got a slightly different take on it. But by some strange coincidence, the last tale ended with Kane firing a castle. And the Gothic Touch begins with Elric and Moonglam seeking refuge in a burned-out castle. And just for a split second, I was thinking, is this going to turn out to be the same castle? No, it's not the same castle. It's not the same castle. But it's a nice bit of fun, this, with Elric and Moonglam meeting a mysterious stranger with a hazy agenda and getting sucked into a side quest, which is pretty much what happens in a lot of Elric novellas when he's knocking about with Moonglam, isn't it? So
Basically.
it makes sense. This is Karl Edward Wagner writing an Elric story, but he is putting himself into it a little bit. There's some amusing bits of dialogue, one in particular when a fed up and exhausted Elric tells Moonglam to try his food to make sure it isn't poisoned, which I'm not sure he would ever do in a Moorcock story. Not sure it feels entirely authentic. But what it lays out clearly is in this story, because they're passing into this castle, which is like a shared location. It's like a liminal space between worlds, which is why this guy who's going to take him on a side quest turns out to be Kane. And what's not obvious in the story we just read, the werewolf story, is made more obvious in this, is that Kane's world is very sword and weird science. And when he first references his sword in this story, and Elric asks him what metal it's made of, he says that starship metal isn't easy to come by.
Yes.
So straight away it's like, oh, this world in which this Gothic werewolf tale took place, there are crashed starships.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And frog people and crystalline aliens. So when you read Bloodstone, basically Kane finds a ring which is from an ancient alien civilization that is being worshipped and guarded by these reptilian frogmen. And he gains the power to command them as well as some of their technology. But of course, the Bloodstone ring is poisoning his mind and making him even more wicked and evil than he already is. He's chaotic neutral at best at any time. But he's really more chaotic evil a lot of the time. So there, so in those collected editions too, like those 2 volumes of all the Kane stories, there are some stories which I've never read, but there's some that take place in the modern day where Kane is like I think he's like a drug kingpin or something like that. And modern day being like the 70s, which is pretty hilarious.
Is this in the Nightshade Press? Those 2 Nightshade Press hardcovers?
I believe so. I've only read about these stories because I haven't found them collected in the paperbacks that I've been able to scrounge up. But I think they're collected in it's called like the Book of Kane, which is like another kind of collection of some short stories. But that one is really hard to find on its own for not a fortune. But maybe one day I'll get that. But anyway, so at one point, I think it's implied in the story that he's trying to build essentially like a spaceship to go and kill God.
Right. Okay. I instantly want to read that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a bit of that, and in some of the other stories you kind of get the impression, obviously, so Kane knows ancient secrets and technologies from all these civilizations that have collapsed before whatever time period he finds himself in at the story. I believe there's a part of that in Dark Crusade as well. I forget exactly what the technology was, but I just remember he digs up something in a desert. He goes to the desert and finds like the remains of where this city was, and he gets something, and I forgot what it was. It was a long time that I read it, and I had a fever. I was reading it. I was sick with a fever when I was doing archaeology in Ireland, and I was laid up in bed for like a week after drinking some water that had filtered through either lead pipes or a cemetery. Either way, I was very sick. And so I just read Dark Crusade that whole time. But so not the clearest memory about that book. But anyway, so that's kind of the thing. So there is like a weird science kind of angle. There's the eldritch occult kind of weird tales aspect. There's just vampires and werewolves and
it's basically all in, isn't it? Anything goes. Yeah.
If there's anything you want, it's probably in the Kane stories.
Yeah,
and it's all dark and grim.
Yeah.
Grim dark, you might say. Could even be the father of grim dark. Some might say, well, maybe not. Maybe Conan, maybe Moorcock. All these kind of things persist. But definitely very, I would say, it has to be pretty influential on some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think Karl Edward Wagner is one of those authors who's like author's favourite authors type author, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because not only was he writing interesting fiction, but he was picked to do editorial jobs. So, I mean, of course, he edited that series of Conan collections in the 70s, which I think was the very first time that you could get the Conan stories in editions where they were unsullied by Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. So
That is
restored the
correct.
original Howard texts. Yeah.
Yep.
I picked those up from a second-hand bookshop in Fleetwood for a $5
Nice.
each. I was very, very happy.
I've got one of the copies of Hour of the Dragon. I've got that of his version of that. But yeah, just unedited, untainted, as many in the Howard fandom would probably say, me included.
Yep. With the nice Ken Kelly dust covers as well. Oh.
Gotta love that.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. So yeah, he's an interesting guy. Also wrote an official Conan novel. Was tapped by
Road of Kings, right?
Yeah, Road of Kings. Which I've got to say, I did read it, and it was an easy breezy read, but I can't remember a fucking thing about it. I read it a couple of years ago. Yeah,
I haven't read it yet. If I was gonna read, if I was gonna read a non-Howard Conan book, it would be by Wagner, just for sheer interest if I like his other stuff.
Yeah,
I haven't found that one yet.
I think we've talked about this before, haven't we? The Conan novels by other people are,
usually. Just, at least the Bragg the Barbarian, it's not Conan, so he can do whatever he wants. And that was actually kind of a fun read. Yeah, but yeah. I from what I've heard and what I've just started to read, and in bookstores, just kind of skimming through it.
Yeah, I've got a few of them kicking about in the Old Sphere paperback editions. I've got a couple of Andrew J. Offutt ones. I've got a couple of Bjorn Nyberg ones. I've got the Robert Jordan ones in hardcover collections. My God, I got 50 pages into one of them and just gave up.
That's such an interesting.
So boring.
Yeah, Robert Jordan for Conan.
Yeah,
I don't know. I can't get my head around that. I'm not a big fan of the time anyway.
Yeah, I read the Paul Anderson and the Karl Edward Wagner ones, and they're fine.
Yeah,
but they're just not Robert E. Howard,
Yeah.
Whereas you read Karl Edward Wagner's Kane story, it's his own thing, it's his thing, and it's only like 70 odd pages long, that story, but it's a fucking terrific story. It's beautiful.
It really is.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, well constructed. Yeah, I love it. But this story, the Gothic Touch, starts off as a quest down below. Elric and Moonglum really don't like Kane at all, but I'm not surprised really, because and I remember thinking this when I got this collection back in the day when I didn't know who Kane was, and I maybe hadn't read any Karl Edward Wagner. It reads like a game GM'd by a dude who's brought his own character in as an NPC. And unlucky is stronger than yours, is more mysterious than yours, is cooler than yours. And you've got your player who's got Elric with his demon sword, and the GM's NPC character, who's really his character from his own game, grips Stormbringer by the blade and is like, yeah, Stormbringer doesn't even affect me. Okay, so you bring...
He has no soul.
Yeah, so you bring in Kane into this. So if you understand that makes sense. But when you're reading it without that sort of detailed context of who Kane is, it's just like, well, Elric and Moonglum have come, but they're no Kane.
Right.
The other interesting thing is the quest itself down below this castle turns out to be a crashed spaceship with radiation-mutated cannibals that the last survivors of a cult that worshipped a crashed spaceship. And the objective of the quest, which Kane said was jewels and treasures, is a transducer and enough weapons-grade plutonium to nuke the castle and close the rift in time and space. So it's like a classic Elric short tale done by the way of a guy that thought Expedition to the Barrier Peaks was the height of D&D modules. Yeah.
I just like the way that the Kane just orders Moonglum around.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you tend the fire? Like, he kind of respects Elric because he introduces himself. He shows up in the story, the lightning flashes and Kane's there in the doorway with his bloody sword in hand and the head and somebody's severed head in his hand. And then he realizes, oh, that's the head of the people. That's the head of the guy who's hunting Elric and Moonglum that they're trying to flee from. And he's like, and I even made you dinner. So like, come help me get this weapons grade plutonium thing. Come on.
Which is fair, I suppose. Elric and Moonglum were in trouble. They were hungry and they were getting chased, and Kane solved all the problems for them.
There you go.
Whilst going, yeah, I'm bigger, I'm cooler, I'm harder. Yeah. It's a fun story. I feel for Moonglum because when Kane says, Moonglum, tend the fire, he says, I don't take orders from you. And then Elric goes, Moonglum, tend the fire.
I know.
Moonglum doesn't deserve that.
He doesn't. Poor guy.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Yeah, so fun story. And I've got to say, I haven't read any of the stories in this. I think I read it pretty much back to back when I first got it. This Tales of the White Wolf. There's a lot of weak stuff in there.
That's what I've heard. I bought this specifically for this story, just so I could read the crossover. I'll get to the other stuff at some point, but it's like 20 pages, 30 pages. It's a very short story.
There's some nice illustrations, though.
Fun. Oh, yeah.
Some really nice illustrations. A variety of illustrations of Elric by different artists, black and white, that are really nice. And there are some good stories in here. And, unfortunately, splashed on the cover, new original fiction by Nancy A. Collins, Neil Gaiman, Tad Williams. Oh, dear, that's aged poorly, hasn't it? Karl Edward Wagner, Jodie Lynn Knight, and 19 others, including a new Elric tale by Moorcock. I remember reading that at the time. And if you just flick open to the Elric story, the first thing you see is Count Renark, Von Beck. So Renark from the Sundered Worlds, Count Von Beck. No doubt there'll be probably Grey Fees or something like that in there. So this is very much a latter-day Elric story. Captain Quelch is in there. So yes.
What a name!
Yeah, Captain Quelch from the Blood trilogy. Yeah. So this is an Elric crossover story with the Grey Fees stories, the Blood stories, the Sundered Worlds, the Von Beck stories, all slammed into about 30 odd pages. So I might read that over the next couple of days and remind myself of it, because I don't remember liking it at the time, but it was a long time ago, and you've got to reevaluate these things, haven't you? So.
Well, there you go. And if all that fails, then you can just go back to reading Kane and Elric and Moonglum descending into the bowels of a ruined castle to kill a bunch of radioactive mutants and find a bunch
There is a great bit where a six-breasted woman throws her baby at Moonglum's face.
Oh, yeah. How could you forget that? That's, that's the type of beautiful stuff that you get from Karl Edward Wagner.
I think the baby tries to bite his forehead on its way past as it sails past his head. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good gruesome stuff in here. It's a fun little quick tale. So if you have this book, definitely give it a shot. Check out the other stuff by Karl Edward Wagner. Check out the Kane stories. They're all pretty cool. I really like Night Winds as a collection of short stories. They're all really cool. But yeah, so Death Angel's Shadow, I've been meaning to get to this one for a while, and I thought, all right, well, you know what? A lot of other podcasts have just covered Night Winds. That's like the one that people normally start out with, which, in fairness, it is a good starter, but we're going to do something a little bit different. Death Angel's Shadow. Yeah,
well, in February, we should come back and, how many pages are these other stories? So let's have a look. The next one, Cold Light, is in the region of about 90 pages. So there's a podcast. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do it.
And the other one's pretty short.
Funny enough, this Tales of the White Wolf, there's also an Eternal Champion volume as well in the same series. They did an Eternal Champion one. So it's all Tales of the Eternal Champion by other authors.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, presentation's very similar. I've got it kicking around here somewhere. But on an old podcast, me and Loz, probably 3 years ago, said, right, what we'll do for a future podcast is... That's just here. What we'll do for a future podcast is we will roll a D20 twice and pick 2 stories to do from that Tales of the Eternal Champion volume. And we picked them and we read them and we just went, I don't really want to talk about them. So we didn't bother. And we just moved on and did something else. Yeah, which is a shame. But there you go. Well, Dave, thanks as ever for popping to Derry Toms, and thanks for introducing me to this Kane story, because it was great, and now I can't wait to find out, I should say. I can't wait till I can start talking properly again, number one. And number two, I can't wait to find out how he deals with erotic vampires.
I can think of a few ways, but we'll see what Kane gets up to with his strangler's hands and piercing evil blue eyes.
Yeah. All right, bud. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
My pleasure. Take care.
Right, this is Andy and Dave from the future of our broadcasting to the past, because the strange situation and the strange conditions around the starship under the castle where weird fucking things are going on with radiation-mutated cannibals. Mutated cannibals. Well, something we forgot to mention is the beast that Kane needed Elric to kill with Stormbringer is described, and it's a star spawn of Cthulhu. I forgot to mention it in the main body of the podcast, so here we are, bringing it back up and blasting it back from the future.
That's right, because what is time and what is space, listener? A permeable fabric upon which the cosmos is bound, but some may traverse it at will. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, that was a cool thing. Definitely to throw that one in there. So now you know, audience, that, Star Spawn of Cthulhu, weapons grade plutonium, radiated mutants, Kane, Elric, Moonglum. What more can you ask for in like about 30 pages?
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Anyway, back to the werewolf break.
Werewolf break! It's a werewolf break! Boom, boom, boom.
Many thanks to Dave for joining me once again. It turns out that Reflections for the Winter of My Soul was picked up for movie treatment in the early 2000s by producers Lauren Muse and Dean Masserman for their production company Tonic Films, the outfit behind Cabin Fever and Cabin Fever 2, Spring Fever, and a handful of other films. It never came to fruition though, and Tonic Films seem mainly to make promotional films for the car industry these days, although that might be a totally different Tonic Films. Who knows? Another one that got away. But if you're yearning for some amusing throwback sword and sorcery film action, I heartily recommend Steve Kostansky's Deathstalker reboot, all the fun of Deathstalker 2, and none of the terribly dated misogyny of the first Deathstalker, and produced by Birmingham's very own Slash. In SÖNUS news, as Dave suggested, their new single, Pagan Woman, and accompanying video, release on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, and they're playing a show that day opening for desert rock legends Yawning Man at Cafe Colonial in Sacramento, California. Get down there if you're in that neck of the woods. It's hard to believe it's been almost 4 years since the last SÖNUS album, Usurper of the Universe. Their full new cut is due for release in May. I'll let the press release do the talking here. This album is the culmination of more than 3 years of literal blood, sweat and tears. Recorded live in the studio to capture the raw, untamed power of their performances. It's a blistering, hell-bent journey through madness, heartbreak, and despair. Yet, within it burns the unrelenting will to survive, to fight, and to triumph, with a sound that harkens back to the golden age of hard rock and the dawn of heavy metal. The Planes of Torment await. May you find the strength to endure with SÖNUS. So, be sure to bookmark that, and I'll link to the video countdown for Pagan Woman in the show notes. But, in the meantime, thanks as ever to our glorious patrons. First, those without tier, Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And our Chaos Engineers, Ed Von Stort, Andrew Clark, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave F., Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Rex Ossius Nusquam, Roger McCarthy, Scott Butler, Simon Perrins, Steve Braun, and of course thanks to our crafty jugaderos, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alexander Harris, Kathy Rhubarb, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, James Connell, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Lone Hugo, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Hewlett, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Nick Hopkinson, Ofa Ziv, Sean Twist, Toby White, and Taylor Lavery. An eternal thanks to our patron demons. First up, and new to the Don Blass, is Jeremy Gilbert. Jem is an academic, writer and podcaster, and he'll be co-hosting here on Breakfast in the Ruins in the spring, when we can dig into his history with Moorcock. Thanks for coming aboard, Jem. And thanks to Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andy Darby, Brian Henderson, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hjarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Liam Jones, Mary Slatauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tone Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Enough of my yakking. Don't forget you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. We have our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, wherever you are in the world and whatever is going on your turf, please take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.